Elena adjusted her grip on little Ethan's hand as they paused at the edge of a vast schoolyard, the early morning light painting gentle hues across the dew-laden pavement. The soft, excited chatter of her son filled her heart with both delight and a subtle twinge of melancholy, a reminder of the precious reasons why she had accepted the position at Ashford Estate. Although life had not been kind to her, and poverty had long shadowed her steps, the promise of steady employment at the sprawling residence of Christian Ashford felt like a beacon of hope, a lifeline leading her to a brighter future. Elena's mind raced back to the day she first heard of the estate. The allure of financial stability had driven her to apply for a position that, on its surface, promised only work amid grandeur. She knew little about Christian Ashford, apart from his formidable wealth and reputation for maintaining an emotional distance from those around him. Still, with no alternatives available, Elena had stepped into a world that was as intimidating as it was mesmerizing. Upon arriving at the estate, Elena's breath caught in her throat as she took in the scene before her. Beyond the imposing wrought-iron gates that stood like silent sentinels, manicured lawns spread in perfectly trimmed expanses, and every flower bed seemed to have been designed with meticulous care. This was not merely a house. It was a palace of understated opulence. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, she straightened her posture and crossed the threshold into a realm of marble-floored corridors that stretched into infinity. Overhead, crystal chandeliers refracted beams of light into countless sparkles, and every surface shone with a care that spoke of an almost obsessive attention to detail. Yet, for all its splendor, the estate felt oddly sterile, reminiscent of a museum where beauty was preserved behind glass rather than lived in. Elena began her duties with quiet diligence, focusing on each task as if it were a step toward reclaiming a life of dignity. While she dusted the intricate frame of a large window, a subtle sensation of being watched pricked at her senses. Pausing, she turned to discover a small pair of eyes observing her from the shadows of a doorway. The boy's cautious brown eyes quickly shifted away, leaving Elena with an unspoken question lingering in the cool air of the corridor. This mysterious child was none other than Maxwell, the 5-year-old son of Christian Ashford. In the brief glimpse she caught, Maxwell's shy demeanor stirred memories within Elena, reminding her painfully of the loneliness that sometimes clouded young Ethan's days. A warm smile tugged at her lips as she longed to offer him reassurance, yet before she could speak, the little boy vanished into the labyrinth of the mansion's corridors. Later in the day, as Elena methodically attended to her cleaning duties, a sudden presence disrupted the silence. Christian Ashford appeared unexpectedly in the hallway, his presence commanding and uncompromising. Tall, with chiseled features and dressed in attire that exuded refined taste, he moved with an air of authority that left no room for casual conversation. In a voice that was as cool as the marble underfoot, he declared, "I expect professionalism." His words, delivered with little regard for her presence, carried an unmistakable note of finality. Follow the rules, perform your duties, shun distractions, and never overstep the boundaries. This is no place for personal connections. His tone was as unyielding as the steel in the estate's very foundations, leaving Elena with a disquieting chill that belied the warmth of the home's opulence. Nodding respectfully, Elena felt an unspoken warning settle in the pit of her stomach. Even as she resumed her work, she could not shake the disconcerting realization of how the grandeur around her concealed an emptiness that was palpable. The estate, magnificent yet void of true life, mirrored the distant eyes of its master. As dusk drew near and Elena prepared to leave for the day, fate brought her face to face with Maxwell once again. This time, he was no longer hidden in the shadows, but stood quietly by an ornate pillar, his small figure partially obscured, yet no longer as timid. Determined to bridge the gap of isolation, Elena knelt down to his level and greeted him with a soft, gentle voice. "Hello there, I'm Elena. I'll be working here from now on." Her words, imbued with warmth and a genuine desire to connect, softened the edges of the boy's reserve. Though Maxwell's eyes flickered with hesitance, he did not flee. Instead, he nodded ever so slightly, his posture still tense with uncertainty. Seizing the opportunity to engage further, Elena reached into her pocket and produced a coin. "Do you enjoy games?" she inquired softly. "My Ethan adores playing this little game." With a playful glimmer in her eyes, she explained, "It's called heads or tails." Maxwell's head tilted inquisitively as he watched the coin glint in the fading light. Elena flipped it high into the air, and together they followed its graceful arc, a momentary dance of chance and delight. When the coin finally landed, she cheerfully declared, "Heads!" and encouraged Maxwell to take his turn. In that brief, sparkling moment, the corner of Maxwell's mouth lifted into a smile, small and tentative, yet filled with promise. Their shared laughter and the quiet thrill of the game breathed life into the cold corridors of Ashford Estate, momentarily thawing its rigid formality. Before Elena left, she leaned forward and softly promised, "We'll play again tomorrow, all right?" Maxwell's nod was accompanied by a lingering smile that hinted at newfound hope. As Elena walked home that evening, her thoughts swirled around the connection she had forged with the child. Maxwell's loneliness, so achingly familiar, resonated deeply with her own fears of isolation for young Ethan. The rigid rules of the estate and the imperious nature of Christian Ashford loomed in her mind, yet the promise of warmth and a shared moment of joy with Maxwell seemed to transcend those boundaries. In the days that followed, Maxwell's quiet presence became a constant, as if drawn irresistibly toward Elena's gentle nature. Whether she was polishing an antique mirror or meticulously dusting the vast library, the little boy would appear at unexpected moments, peeking from behind a doorway or lingering near a grand staircase with a mix of curiosity and cautious admiration. Elena, sensing the fragile spirit within him, began to carve out moments during her breaks to speak with him. These brief exchanges, filled with whispered stories, humorous antics, and playful games, evolved into cherished rituals that lit up an otherwise somber day. To Maxwell, Elena was an unexpected revelation, a bright burst of color amid the dull, regimented world of tutors and strict caretakers. Unlike the stern figures who populated the estate, Elena's laughter was genuine, her expressions animated, and her words filled with a kindness that defied the chill of the mansion. She treated Maxwell not as an obligation imposed by circumstance, but as a precious soul in need of care and affection. With each shared smile, each quirky tale or silly game, a spark of genuine connection began to kindle in Maxwell's heart, a glimmer of joy that he had not known he was missing. One bright afternoon, with the sun casting playful shadows across the polished floors of a seldom-used parlor, Elena decided to introduce a new game. With a playful grin and a twinkle in her eye, she withdrew a small quarter from her pocket. "Would you like to see a little magic trick?" she asked softly, holding the coin aloft as though it were a secret treasure. Maxwell, his eyes wide with anticipation, nodded eagerly. Elena performed an elaborate gesture of rubbing the coin between her palms, pretending it had mysteriously vanished, only to reveal it again with a flourish, now tucked behind Maxwell's ear. The boy's eyes widened in astonishment, and a burst of unrestrained laughter filled the quiet room, the sound echoing against the high ceilings and marble surfaces. Each trick Elena performed was a gentle act of rebellion against the strict order of the estate. Her playful antics imbued the space with an energy that was almost palpable. Even the quiet, ever-watchful staff began to notice the change in Maxwell. In hushed tones near the ornate kitchen, a voice remarked, "Have you seen him lately? He seems like a completely different child, lighter, happier." Rumors began to circulate among the staff, speculating on the nature of Elena's influence on the young boy. Some questioned the motives behind her affections, while others silently celebrated the newfound joy that Maxwell exhibited. For Elena, however, these moments were not about seeking approval or favor. They were about gifting Maxwell the happiness he so richly deserved, a small, shining beacon of hope amid a life that otherwise felt overwhelmingly structured and cold. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Elena and Maxwell deepened. Even amidst the strict protocols imposed by the grand estate, every shared game, every whispered secret, and every burst of laughter served to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Maxwell, who had always seemed subdued and uncertain, began to blossom in the warmth of Elena's care. His laughter grew more frequent, his steps lighter, and his eyes sparkled with a newfound curiosity about life beyond the confines of his sheltered existence. Then, one fateful evening, as twilight melted into the quiet embrace of night, Christian Ashford returned home unexpectedly. After a grueling day spent entangled in the intricacies of his business, he walked through the grand entrance of the estate with the weariness of a man burdened by responsibilities. Yet, as he strolled down a dimly lit corridor, a sudden sound, The pure, unfiltered laughter of a child halted him in his tracks. The sound, light and joyful, seemed to cut through the somber silence like a ray of unexpected sunshine. Drawn by an unfamiliar mixture of curiosity and reluctance, Christian slowly followed the sound to a door left slightly ajar. Peering inside, he discovered a scene that both surprised and unsettled him. In the center of a spacious playroom, Maxwell was seated on the polished floor, his laughter filling the air with an infectious exuberance. Across from him sat Elena, her face animated as she mimicked the hooting of an owl, her hands framing her face to resemble delicate wings. The scene was surreal. A small boy, so long confined to an austere life of rigid routines, now basking in the spontaneous joy of simple magic. In that moment, Christian's heart was torn between conflicting emotions. The sight of Maxwell's unrestrained delight awakened a tenderness in him that he had long buried beneath layers of formality and control. Yet, at the same time, he felt a pang of discomfort, an uneasy realization that the structured life he had meticulously crafted might be lacking the very warmth his son now so clearly craved. For a long, silent minute he stood in the doorway, his presence unnoticed by the pair engrossed in their shared moment of wonder. Then, almost reluctantly, he stepped back, unable to intrude upon a scene that stirred both nostalgia and regret. That night, as Christian sat alone in his study, surrounded by the cold solidity of contracts and business reports, the image of Maxwell's radiant laughter haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing from their lives, a sense of spontaneity, of genuine connection that no sum of money or grand design could ever replace. The memory of the playful exchange between Elena and Maxwell gnawed at him, a bittersweet reminder of what might have been if he had ever allowed himself to embrace the softer, more human side of life. In the following days, the atmosphere within Ashford Estate shifted imperceptibly. Elena continued her duties with quiet determination, and Maxwell's laughter began to echo through corridors that once resonated only with order and formality. The staff, though discreet, watched as the little boy's demeanor transformed from one of timid reserve to a more hopeful and buoyant spirit. Meanwhile, the estate itself, with its immaculate surfaces and imposing architecture, seemed to soften ever so slightly in the presence of genuine human warmth. Yet not all were oblivious to the changes taking place. Christian Ashford, whose days had been consumed by an unyielding pursuit of success, began to question the true meaning of his relentless discipline. In a hushed conversation with Mrs. Whitmore, the long-serving head housekeeper known for her quiet wisdom, he inquired, "Does Maxwell spend much time with the new housekeeper?" Her measured response, laced with a hint of understanding, was a simple, "Yes, sir. He seems far happier now that she's around." Those words, though softly spoken, resonated deeply with him, igniting in his heart a spark of introspection he had long denied. One afternoon, driven by a restlessness he could no longer ignore, Christian decided to venture further into the private quarters of the estate. With each step, the polished marble beneath his feet echoed a cadence of memories, of opportunities missed, of the warmth of a shared laugh, of a happiness that had quietly slipped away. As he approached the playroom once more, his resolve wavered under the weight of his internal conflict. Would he dare disturb the sanctuary where genuine joy had blossomed? Inside the playroom, the scene was as vivid as he remembered. Maxwell, now comfortably immersed in a world of playful imagination, sat amidst a scattering of toys and colorful drawings that adorned the walls. Elena, who had become a gentle guardian of this small but vibrant world, was seated cross-legged on a cushioned mat, engaged in a lively game of make-believe with Maxwell. In that moment, Christian felt an unexpected surge of emotion, a mix of wistful longing and a profound sense of loss for the tenderness that had always been missing from his life. Unable to contain the swell of emotions any longer, Christian quietly withdrew, leaving behind the echo of Maxwell's delighted giggles. That night, as he returned to his solitary study, the mansion's vast emptiness seemed to mirror the hollowness that now tugged at his soul. The stark contrast between the meticulously controlled environment of Ashford Estate and the genuine, albeit fleeting, bursts of joy brought on by Elena's presence forced him to confront a painful truth. Despite all his achievements, he had inadvertently neglected the very essence of life that his son so desperately needed. In the days that followed, every corner of the estate seemed imbued with the lingering traces of those tender moments shared in the playroom. Maxwell's laughter continued to ripple through the halls, a gentle rebellion against the rigidity that had once defined this home. Elena, aware of the silent undercurrents that now passed between her and the master of the estate, maintained her warm and unassuming manner, determined to nurture the spark of joy that had taken root in Maxwell's heart. Her every interaction, every smile, every playful game was an act of quiet defiance against the impersonal, sterile environment that had dominated the household for so long. As twilight settled over Ashford Estate one cool evening, Elena found herself alone in the expansive garden, a place where the moonlight danced on manicured hedges and ancient statues cast long, reflective shadows. It was in that quiet solitude that she allowed herself a moment of introspection. The laughter of Maxwell, the soft murmurs of joy echoing from hidden corners of the mansion, and the bittersweet memory of Christian's distant gaze, all blended into a single, poignant realization. Despite the rigid rules and the stark divisions imposed by wealth and circumstance, the simple act of sharing joy could bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Elena silently vowed that, for as long as she remained in this household, she would continue to be the gentle force that brought light into Maxwell's life. Her determination was unshaken. Even if the moments of genuine connection were fleeting, they were infinitely more valuable than any material possession or rigid order could ever be. And so, with each passing day, as Maxwell's laughter echoed a little louder and the colors of his imaginative world grew a bit brighter, Elena understood that her role here was far greater than that of a mere caretaker. She was a bearer of hope, a quiet guardian of innocence, and perhaps, in time, a catalyst for change in the lives of those trapped behind the imposing facades of wealth and formality. By the time the season began to shift and the long, oppressive shadows of winter gave way to the tentative promise of spring, the transformation within Ashford Estate was undeniable. The once cold and unyielding corridors had softened with the residue of shared moments, and even Christian Ashford found himself pausing, if only for a fleeting moment, to observe Maxwell's playful antics with a gaze that was both pensive and regretful. In that silent acknowledgement lay the unspoken admission of a father who had long misplaced his understanding of what it meant to truly nurture his child's spirit. In the quiet aftermath of those unforgettable days, Elena's gentle influence continued to resonate. Every playful trick, every shared smile, and every lighthearted moment had stitched together a tapestry of warmth and human connection within a place that had once been defined solely by its imposing grandeur and unyielding order. And though the echoes of laughter might one day fade, the memory of that fleeting magic would forever remain embedded in the very soul of Ashford Estate. The atmosphere in the mansion had been transformed by Elena's gentle influence, a transformation that was having a profound effect on Maxwell, her young charge, and it unsettled Christian Ashford more deeply than he cared to admit. Over the following days, he found himself scrutinizing every moment of their interaction from a distance. Maxwell's once muted laughter had blossomed into frequent, heartwarming expressions of delight, and his shy smiles now shone with a brightness that was impossible to ignore. Each instance of joy that Maxwell shared with Elena was a stark reminder to Christian that his role as a father was not unfolding as he had envisioned. One crisp afternoon, as the aroma of freshly brewed tea mingled with the subtle scent of polished wood in the stately kitchen, Christian unexpectedly encountered Elena tidying up near the back of the room. The sudden presence of his footsteps startled her. Her hands froze in mid-motion as she turned to face him with uncertainty. "I have observed that you spend an inordinate amount of time with my son," Christian began, his tone measured yet laced with guarded reproach. But Elena met his intense gaze without hesitation and replied softly, "Yes, sir. I noticed Maxwell seemed terribly lonely, and I only wished to bring him a measure of cheer." For a long moment, a heavy silence fell between them. Christian's eyes betrayed an internal conflict. He yearned to ask why Elena could connect with Maxwell so effortlessly, a connection he had struggled to cultivate himself, but the thought remained locked away, unspoken and uncomfortable. Gathering herself, Elena continued with quiet resolve. "Children need someone who truly sees them. They require a friend, a playmate who will cherish them without expecting anything in return. I am simply trying to do that." Her words, humble yet piercing in their sincerity, struck Christian in a way he had not anticipated. There was no hidden agenda, no calculated manipulation. Only genuine care emanated from her every syllable. Overwhelmed by the unexpected honesty, Christian averted his gaze and departed the room silently, leaving Elena amid an air of unresolved tension. In the days that followed, Christian's observations grew ever more acute. He watched from afar as Elena and Maxwell interacted. Each tender moment, every spontaneous burst of laughter, each playful glimmer in Maxwell's eyes, became a testament to a truth he could no longer ignore. His son's happiness now depended more on the humble kindness of Elena than on any lavish gift or material privilege he could bestow. This realization left him feeling diminutive, perplexed, and deeply conflicted. How could it be that a woman with no wealth and no grand ambitions had managed to provide Maxwell with something so invaluable, a genuine, heartwarming connection that no amount of money could ever purchase? At first, Christian tried to dismiss these troubling reflections as trivial distractions, convinced that if he simply refocused on his work, the mansion would soon return to its customary stillness. Yet as the days melted into weeks, doubt crept in insidiously. He began to wonder if Elena's kindness might harbor ulterior motives. Was it possible that she was using Maxwell's loneliness as a means to secure a more permanent place in the household? A way to ingratiate herself into the very fabric of his family life? Fueled by his own pride and a growing suspicion, Christian's mind began crafting a series of dark narratives. In his inner dialogue, he painted Elena as an opportunist, a woman who was manipulating his son's vulnerability to gain power in a home that he had built with such care and determination. One fateful evening, after allowing his suspicions to ferment for too long, Christian resolved to confront her. In the expansive living room, where the setting sun's golden light slowly gave way to long, somber shadows, he found Elena arranging Maxwell's toys with her customary gentle precision. Her calm demeanor in that moment was shattered by the sound of his deliberate footsteps, and she straightened instantly, her eyes reflecting both surprise and apprehension. Crossing his arms and adopting a stance that exuded authority, Christian's voice was cold as he said, "Elena, may I have a word with you?" Startled by his tone, she answered quietly, "Of course, Mr. Ashford, is something the matter?" Christian's gaze, dark and unwavering, bore into her as he continued, "I have noticed that what began as a strictly professional relationship has evolved into something far too personal. Your closeness with my son is becoming unsettling." The accusation hung in the air, thick with tension. Elena blinked, momentarily struggling to reconcile his words with the truth she knew in her heart. "Mr. Ashford, I have only ever aimed to ensure that Maxwell does not feel abandoned in this vast, impersonal environment. He is a sweet, sensitive boy who deserves to experience genuine joy," she replied, her tone measured yet imbued with a quiet hurt. But Christian's heart had grown hardened, and his voice, now edged with indignation, rose further. "And what right do you have to involve yourself so intimately in his life? Do you think I am oblivious to your methods? It appears to me that you are deliberately trying to secure your position here by gaining his trust." His words struck Elena like a physical blow, and for a long, painful moment she could only stand there, stunned by the severity of his accusation. The opulent room, filled with relics of wealth and order, now reverberated with the sound of a harsh reprimand. After a silence that seemed to stretch into eternity, Elena's voice emerged, steady despite the hurt evident in her eyes. "Mr. Ashford, my only intention has ever been to care for Maxwell and to bring him even a fraction of the happiness that every child deserves. I have never sought to overstep my boundaries or to claim a place that does not belong to me." Her words were soft yet resolute, a heartfelt defense of her simple acts of kindness. Yet Christian, blinded by pride and suspicion, turned his gaze away. His silence was his final judgment, a clear refusal to consider her explanation. Without another word, he left the room, leaving Elena standing alone amid the echo of his departure. The impact of that confrontation was immediate and devastating. Elena felt an acute, piercing pain, a betrayal that cut deeply, not only because of Christian's rejection of her genuine care, but also because it signified a fundamental misunderstanding of what Maxwell truly needed. With a heavy heart, she made a decision that would irrevocably alter the lives of those in the mansion. "If that is how you see me, Mr. Ashford," she declared softly, "then I see no reason for me to remain here." With those final words, laden with sorrow and resignation, she turned and walked out of the room, each step carrying the weight of a trust that had been shattered. That evening, in the dimming light of dusk, Elena moved quietly to pack her few personal belongings. Each item she collected was a reminder of the warmth and connection that had briefly brightened Maxwell's life, a brightness that now, with her departure, would be forever dimmed. Before leaving, however, she felt compelled to perform one last act of tenderness. Stepping out into the garden where twilight still lingered, she found Maxwell playing quietly amid the fading light. His face lit up at the sight of her, a spark of joy that was quickly replaced by confusion when he noticed the worn bag slung over her shoulder. "Are you leaving, Aunt Elena?" he asked in a small, trembling voice, his eyes wide with an emotion too complex for his tender years. Kneeling down to meet his gaze, Elena took his small hands in hers, her voice tender and full of bittersweet affection. "Yes, Maxwell, I must leave," she whispered, "but know that every moment we shared meant the world to me. You are a remarkable boy, and I hope you never stop smiling, even when life feels unbearably hard." Her words, spoken with a deep and aching sincerity, reached Maxwell's heart. For a brief, heart-rending moment, he wrapped his arms around her in an embrace that was equal parts love and desperate plea. "Will you come back?" he murmured, his voice trembling with fragile hope. Unable to give a definitive answer, Elena held him even tighter, silently conveying her own sorrow and regret, before finally releasing him with a final, pained glance. As she walked away from the mansion for the last time that night, Elena's eyes brimmed with tears, yet her dignity remained intact. The mansion, once filled with echoes of joyful laughter and tender play, fell into an oppressive silence. Maxwell went to bed without his customary light, and in his solitude, Christian sat alone, his mind tormented by the deep void left by her absence. In his study that night, amidst mountains of contracts and the cold light of ambition, Christian felt an emptiness more crushing than any of the mansion's grandiose decor. In a feeble attempt to dispel the pervasive gloom, Christian leaned down to Maxwell, who sat quietly with his head bowed. "What do you say we do something together?" he offered in a strained, uncertain tone. "We can go anywhere you'd like." But his words seemed to vanish into the thick silence. Maxwell, motionless and withdrawn, barely acknowledged his father's presence, his small frame a mute testament to a sorrow that had taken root deep within him. Christian tried to convince himself that this was merely a temporary phase, a transient reaction that time and new distractions would eventually erase. Yet as the days turned into weeks, the oppressive silence in the mansion deepened. The once bright and lively Maxwell had become a shadow of his former self. The radiant laughter that had once filled every corner of the estate was now replaced by a persistent, haunting quiet. Even the extravagant gifts and meticulously planned outings meant to bring back the spark of joy failed miserably to elicit any sign of his former enthusiasm. One afternoon, with a mixture of forced cheer and desperation, Christian presented Maxwell with a sleek, remote-controlled car. "Look at this, my dear boy," he said eagerly. "Would you like to try it out with me?" But Maxwell only glanced at the toy for a fleeting second, shook his head ever so slightly, and muttered in a barely audible tone, "I don't want it." The rejection cut deeply, undermining every grand gesture Christian had so desperately hoped would mend the widening gap between them. As Maxwell continued to withdraw, even the familiar faces of the nannies and household staff were met with his silent rebuffs. Instead, the young boy spent long, agonizing hours alone in his room. Christian often noticed a faint strip of light seeping beneath Maxwell's door in the dead of night, a quiet indication that sleep eluded him as he wrestled with the overwhelming void. On one particularly heart-rending evening, Christian found Maxwell sitting on his bed, clutching one of the modest toys Elena had once given him, a small, humble token of care that now symbolized the only remnant of the warmth he had known. Other nights, Maxwell would sit by the window, staring out into the darkness, as if silently waiting for a comforting presence that had long since vanished. No grand gift or extravagant effort could fill the growing chasm in Maxwell's heart. Christian attempted to speak with his son, to coax him back to the light with words of reassurance, but Maxwell remained locked in a silence so profound that even his occasional murmurs evoked memories of the final, bitter confrontation with Elena. A confrontation fueled by pride and suspicion that now haunted Christian with relentless remorse. The harsh words he had flung at her echoed in his mind, the accusations, the cold dismissal, and the devastating impact they had wrought. One night, as Christian sat in the still darkness, he heard Maxwell softly whispering a name, a single, shattering syllable, "Elena." That sound, fragile and filled with sorrow, struck him like a dagger to his heart, a painful confirmation that the woman he had cast aside was the only one capable of bringing true joy into his son's life. The realization was both devastating and transformative. Christian's pride, the very trait that had driven Elena away, now seemed heavy and meaningless. Each passing day without her presence deepened the void, as memories of Maxwell's laughter and the simple, genuine happiness they had once shared haunted him relentlessly. The mansion, once a proud symbol of wealth and order, now resembled a mausoleum of lost love, a place where every corridor whispered of the life that had withered away with Elena's departure. In this overwhelming silence, Christian could no longer ignore the truth. No luxurious toy or grand outing could ever replace the heartfelt connection that Elena had so selflessly provided. In the depths of his despair, Christian resolved that something must be done. He could not allow Maxwell to drift further into isolation. With his heart heavy with regret, he understood that he must embark on a journey to mend what he had so carelessly broken. One crisp morning, with the weight of sorrow pressing down upon him, Christian found Maxwell quietly packing a small backpack with a few essential belongings. In that moment, a chill realization struck him. Maxwell had chosen to leave the mansion in search of Elena, the only person who had ever truly made him feel loved. The thought that his own pride had driven his son to run away was a torment that Christian could scarcely bear. Desperate to atone for his missteps, Christian clutched his car keys and raced out of the mansion, his mind flooded with haunting images of Maxwell's forlorn face and the echo of his whispered pleas for Elena. He drove through the darkened streets, each turn and traffic light an agonizing reminder of the consequences of his actions. The city, with its cacophony of horns and rushing crowds, provided a stark contrast to the lonely corridors of Ashford Estate, a constant, jarring reminder of the life his son now faced alone. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hospital where Maxwell was admitted, Christian's heart pounded with both dread and remorse. The clinical beeps of the monitoring equipment underscored the gravity of the situation as he gazed at his son's fragile form lying in a stark white bed. In that moment, every harsh word he had ever uttered, every ounce of pride that had blinded him, was laid bare before him. Maxwell's small hand, grasped weakly in his, was a silent plea, a desperate call for the warmth and care that had once filled his life. Days passed in a haze of regret and reflection as Christian sat in the hospital's waiting room, his mind churning with the painful memories of Elena's kindness and the irrevocable damage his own actions had caused. The sterile environment, devoid of any genuine warmth, offered no solace. Instead, it became the crucible in which his understanding of true success was slowly reformed. It was not wealth or power that defined him, but the capacity to love, to nurture, and to acknowledge the simple, vital needs of another human being. With every beat of his heart, Christian felt the crushing weight of his failures, and the desperate need to repair the shattered fragments of his family's soul. Finally, summoning every bit of courage he possessed, Christian resolved to find Elena and beg her forgiveness. He reached out quietly to trusted members of his staff and, with great reluctance, discovered that Elena had sought refuge in a modest town far removed from the imposing world of Ashford Estate. The news both relieved and tormented him, relieved that she was safe, yet tormented by the realization of how far he had pushed her away. The long, arduous journey that followed was as much a voyage into the depths of his own soul as it was a physical trip to find the woman he had wronged. When the day of the meeting finally arrived, Christian drove to the quiet town with a heart full of apprehension and a determination to reclaim the lost fragments of love and trust. At a modest, unassuming house that Elena now called home, he hesitated before knocking on the door, a door that symbolized not only her new beginning, but also the possibility of redemption. When Elena opened the door, her eyes met his with a mixture of surprise, guarded sorrow, and the lingering pain of past wounds. For several long, silent moments, the world around them seemed to fade away, until Christian finally spoke, in a voice thick with remorse. "Elena, I have come to apologize. I was wrong. I see now that my pride and my misguided need for control have cost us more than I ever imagined. I am truly sorry for the pain I have caused you and Maxwell." Elena's eyes softened, though the sadness was unmistakable. "Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, "My only wish was to care for Maxwell and to bring him even a small measure of happiness. I have never desired anything more than to be a friend to him." Their conversation stretched long into the afternoon, a cathartic exchange of regrets, hopes, and the tender possibility of forgiveness. In that humble abode, far from the splendor of his mansion, Christian found himself stripped of all pretense. In that raw, honest dialogue, both he and Alina began to understand that the true measure of a man was not in his wealth or his power, but in the ability to love and to be loved. In the weeks that followed, Christian endeavored to rebuild what had been broken. With Elena's cautious blessing, he invited her back into the mansion, not as an employee, but as a cherished presence whose capacity to nurture and heal was finally recognized. Slowly, the cold corridors of Ashford Estate began to transform. Laughter, once a distant memory, returned in gentle ripples through the halls as Maxwell, encouraged by the renewed warmth of his father and the loving presence of Elena, started to rediscover the joy of life. Maxwell's recovery was neither immediate nor complete, but every small smile, every tentative laugh, was a victory over the darkness that had so long engulfed him. Christian, once a man defined by pride and detachment, emerged with a newfound humility. He dedicated himself to his son, determined to fill every empty space with care and understanding, and though the shadow of Elena's absence was still keenly felt, her memory served as a guiding light, a reminder that the simple acts of kindness and genuine connection were far more powerful than any opulent display of wealth. As the mansion healed, so too did the hearts of those who dwelled within it. The legacy of Elena's gentle care endured, inspiring Christian to cherish every fleeting moment of genuine love and to embrace vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. In time, Ashford Estate was transformed from a monument to pride into a home where laughter and love flourished once again. Torn between the past and the promise of a brighter future, Christian vowed never again to let pride overshadow the most essential truths of the heart. The pain of his missteps had carved deep lessons into his soul, lessons that would forever remind him of the cost of neglecting the simplest human need, the need to love and be loved. And in every tender moment that followed, as Maxwell's laughter gradually returned, and as Christian learned to see the world anew through eyes unclouded by arrogance, the memory of Elena's kindness remained an indelible beacon of hope. The moment the sight of young Tobias struck him, it felt as though a crushing blow had been delivered straight to Christian Ashford's heart. There, in the stark, impersonal light of a hospital room, the little boy lay unconscious on a narrow bed, his frail body swathed in bandages. Under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights that did little to mimic the warmth of the sun, Tobias appeared almost ethereal in his fragility. A delicate figure whose innocence was marred by pain and the weight of suffering far beyond his years. A Christian sat vigil at the bedside, his heart pounding in a rhythm of regret and despair as he gently clasped Tobias's tiny hand. In the oppressive silence of that sterile room, a soft, nearly inaudible whisper escaped the injured child's lips. The sound, a fragile utterance that might have been mistaken for a dream, carried the syllables, "Sa Laura." It was as if the boy, in his deepest agony, had summoned the only name that had ever brought him genuine solace. That name shattered the brittle walls Christian had built around himself over years of pride and self-assured detachment, and before he could muster any defense, tears cascaded down his face with a force that startled even him. In that heart-rending moment, Christian realized that his son, despite all the material comforts and rigid schedules he had imposed, had never truly called for him. Instead, in the depths of his pain, Tobias had yearned for the tender care of Laura, a woman whose gentle presence had once lit up every dark corner of his life. Overwhelmed by the tidal surge of remorse and desperation, Christian fumbled for his phone with trembling hands. His voice broke as he composed a halting, anguished plea. "Laura, please, I was wrong. I'm so sorry for everything I've done. Tobias is hurt. He needs you. I beg you to come and see him." On the other end of that desperate call, Laura's heart twisted with a mingling of sorrow and compassion. The memory of leaving the opulent yet cold Ashford mansion had been unbearable, yet her love for Tobias eclipsed any lingering bitterness she might have harbored. Without a moment's hesitation, she assured him that she would come immediately. and then she set out, leaving behind the vestiges of a painful past in pursuit of the child who needed her more than ever. At the hospital, Christian waited in a corridor that reeked of antiseptic and regret, his face ashen and his eyes rimmed with the evidence of sleepless nights. When Laura finally arrived, her presence was as quiet as it was resolute. Her dark hair framed a face marked by compassion and quiet strength, and as she stepped into the room, Christian struggled to articulate the myriad emotions roiling inside him. After a long, uncertain pause, his voice broke with unaccustomed vulnerability. "I was terribly wrong," he admitted, his tone cracking under the weight of his confession. "You're the only one who can help him now. I cannot undo what I've done, but please stay with him for his sake." Laura, with an almost imperceptible nod, allowed her eyes to fill with a mixture of sorrow and hope as she followed Christian to Tobias's room. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the muted beeps of monitors and the hushed rustling of sterile linens. Laura approached the bedside, her heart aching as she took in the sight of Tobias lying so still. Lowering herself gently into the chair beside him, she extended her hand toward the sleeping child, whispering softly, "I'm here, sweet boy. Laura is here with you." Even in his unconscious state, Tobias's tiny fingers curled around hers, a delicate gesture of recognition that brought fresh tears to her eyes and a gentle smile to her lips. From the doorway, Christian observed the tender tableau unfolding before him, a scene that simultaneously filled him with relief and crushed him under the weight of his own guilt. The soft grip of Tobias's hand, the peaceful expression that seemed to flicker across his bruised face, and the serene devotion in Laura's eyes combined to remind him of one undeniable truth: no amount of wealth or control could ever replace the raw, life-affirming power of unconditional love. That night, as Laura stayed by Tobias's side, softly stroking his hair and murmuring words of comfort into the stillness, Christian paced the sterile hallways outside the room. Each measured step echoed his inner torment, replaying the choices that had led him to this moment of irrevocable loss. Every decision, every harsh word, and every act of pride flashed before his eyes, as if in a relentless montage of regret. By the time the first hints of dawn crept through the high windows of the hospital, Tobias finally stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and as his gaze settled on Laura, a fragile smile began to form on his battered face. With a quiet, tentative voice, he whispered, "I knew you'd come, Laura." The soft murmur of his words, filled with the weight of fragile joy and relief, broke something open inside Laura's heart. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she leaned down to envelop Tobias in a tender embrace, her arms conveying a silent promise of unwavering love and protection. Christian, watching from a respectful distance, felt his heart tighten with bittersweet sorrow. The sight of their reunion, so laden with affection and hope, confirmed a painful reality. Laura's nurturing spirit was the very thing Tobias needed, a comfort that Christian, despite all his efforts and resources, had failed to provide. Unable to stand the torment of his own shortcomings any longer, Christian stepped forward into the room. His voice, laden with sorrow and humility, broke the charged silence. "You've done more for him than I ever could," he confessed in a quiet, measured tone. Laura, her eyes fixed on Tobias, said nothing. Her focus was solely on the fragile life before her, a life that had been saved by the simple, honest act of love. Deep down, Christian sensed that this painful episode might be the catalyst for a genuine transformation in his own life, a chance to rebuild his shattered pride and learn what it meant to truly care. Later, as Tobias continued his slow recovery in the calm sanctuary of his hospital room, Christian approached Laura again in the quiet waiting area. His hands fidgeted with nervous energy as he lowered his gaze, struggling to find the right words. "I have made mistakes. Terrible mistakes," he began, his voice a mere whisper of regret. "I don't even know how to explain myself, but doubting you, treating you so harshly, it was the worst mistake of all. You've brought him something I never could. You've given him joy. I should never have made you feel disrespected." Laura paused, allowing his words to settle in the charged silence. The man before her, once so composed and distant, now revealed himself in raw, unguarded vulnerability. For a long moment, no words were exchanged. Finally, Laura's voice emerged, calm and resolute. All I have ever wanted was to help Tobias, to see him smile, to ease his pain. Nothing more." Christian nodded slowly, a tear escaping down his weathered cheek as he continued. "That's why I need you to come back, not just as an employee, but as someone who is truly part of his life and ours. I promise to be a better father, to be there for him every single day. I cannot change the past, but I want to do better from now on." For a long moment, the silence stretched between them, heavy with memories of a cold, unyielding mansion and the sting of harsh words and broken trust. Yet the image of Tobias, his small hand tightly clutching Laura's, his soft voice pleading for her presence, softened Laura's resolve. After a thoughtful pause, she finally replied, "I will return, but only if Tobias's well-being comes first. He needs you to be present for him, and I need to know that our home will be a place of true care and love." Christian's nod was resolute. He understood that Laura's request was simple and selfless, a demand for the care that every child deserved. Over the ensuing weeks, Christian began the arduous work of mending his fractured family. Determined to honor his promise, he restructured his demanding schedule, delegating responsibilities and carving out precious hours to spend with Tobias. At first, his attempts to connect with his son were awkward and filled with hesitation. But slowly, the rigid barriers that had long separated father and child began to crumble. Tobias, initially reticent and guarded, started to respond to his father's newfound tenderness. Gradually, his laughter returned, tentative at first, and then growing more confident and genuine with each passing day. When Laura finally returned to the Ashford mansion, the change in atmosphere was palpable. The vast, cold halls that had once echoed with an eerie silence now vibrated with the gentle hum of renewed life. No longer did Christian view Laura merely as an employee. Instead, he came to see her as a remarkable, indispensable presence whose resilience and kindness had irrevocably altered the course of their lives. Together, the three of them, Christian, Laura, and Tobias, began to forge a bond that transcended the rigid hierarchies of the past. They shared long dinners filled with laughter, stayed up late talking about dreams and hopes, and supported each other through every small triumph and setback. As the days turned into months, Christian found himself transformed by the power of genuine love and connection. The mansion, once a mere symbol of material success and impersonal grandeur, was now evolving into a true home, a haven where every smile, every shared moment of tenderness, and every burst of laughter was cherished as the most valuable treasure of all. One particular evening, after a quiet family dinner, Christian gathered the family in the softly lit drawing room. With a steady, heartfelt tone, he confessed, "I've been given a second chance, a chance to understand what it truly means to have a family. With you, Laura, and Tobias by my side, I finally feel at peace." The transformation in Tobias was remarkable. Once withdrawn and silently tormented, the little boy now exuded a quiet joy. Encouraged by the loving dynamic that had taken root, he embraced his newfound confidence and playfulness. His spontaneous laughter filled the halls, and his eyes shone with the simple delight of a child who had rediscovered the warmth of unconditional love. Christian came to realize that true wealth was not measured by material possessions, but by the strength and authenticity of the bonds that united them. Over time, the connection between Christian and Laura deepened beyond the boundaries of a professional relationship. What had started as a shared mission to care for Tobias gradually blossomed into a profound and heartfelt partnership. Christian, once defined solely by his power and detachment, found himself increasingly drawn to Laura's warmth, compassion, and resilience. In a moment that would forever alter the course of their intertwined lives, Christian gathered his courage one evening and, in the presence of both children, declared, "I have never known this kind of peace before. With you and Tobias, I finally understand what it means to have a family." From a small velvet box, he produced a modest yet elegant ring and, with sincere emotion, asked, "Will you marry me?" Taken by surprise and overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment, Laura felt tears well up in her eyes. Before she could fully process the proposal, Tobias and her son, now known as Reed, a close friend who had grown inseparable with Tobias, burst into joyful cheers, their small arms wrapping around her in an embrace of pure delight. With her heart overflowing, Laura whispered, "Yes, Christian, I do." At that moment, the mansion was transformed beyond recognition. It was no longer just a stately building of cold stone and marble. It had become a sanctuary of love, hope, and second chances. In the months that followed, Laura and Reed moved into the Ashford mansion permanently, and the once sterile corridors resonated with the playful sounds of children and the gentle murmur of shared stories. Not long after their union, Laura received the joyful news that she was expecting a baby, a symbol of new beginnings and a further promise of the life they were building together. The prospect of a new life filled the household with an energy that was both vibrant and tender. Tobias and Reed, excited at the thought of welcoming a new sibling, eagerly anticipated the arrival of the baby. They embraced every moment with a childlike enthusiasm that reaffirmed the newfound warmth that now defined their family. Christian, too, experienced a profound transformation. The lessons he had learned through his painful mistakes led him to embrace fatherhood with a renewed spirit. The Ashford mansion, once a monument to isolation and formality, now pulsed with the rhythm of a true family. A place where love was the most valued currency. One cold winter evening, as the first gentle snowflakes began to fall outside and the world was draped in a soft, silent blanket of white, the family gathered around a massive Christmas tree in the grand living room. Its lights twinkled like distant stars, and the rich scent of pine mingled with cinnamon and the soft strains of familiar carols. Tobias and Reed, with mischievous grins and unrestrained joy, carefully hung ornaments on the tree, while Laura watched with a warm smile and a cup of steaming cocoa in her hands. Christian, standing nearby, adjusted the star atop the tree with deliberate care, a gesture that symbolized his newfound commitment to nurturing the delicate bonds of his family. In that moment, as he looked at the radiant faces of Laura, Tobias, and Reed, he realized that the true measure of success was not in financial prosperity, but in the enduring love and unity they shared. The mansion, once cold and impersonal, had blossomed into a true home, filled with hope, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Later that night, as the family joined hands for a quiet prayer, they expressed their heartfelt gratitude for the blessings of the past and the promise of new beginnings. Their voices melded with the soft patter of snow against the windows, creating a symphony of love and gratitude that echoed throughout the house. As the prayer ended and the family embraced one another, Christian softly murmured, "This is what truly matters." His words, spoken with genuine emotion, resonated deeply with everyone present. In the days and months that followed, the transformation of the Ashford mansion continued. Every corner of the once cold estate now radiated with life and love. Simple moments, a shared meal, a spontaneous hug, the gentle laughter of children playing, became the foundation of a legacy far more enduring than any material possession. Christian, Laura, Tobias, and Reed learned to cherish every fleeting moment, understanding that true fulfillment lay in the strength of their connections rather than the accumulation of wealth. Reflecting on his journey, Christian realized that his previous arrogance and pride had blinded him to the most essential truths of life. The painful lessons taught by Tobias's suffering and Laura's unwavering compassion had ultimately led him to embrace a new, more meaningful way of living. No longer would he measure his success by the size of his bank account or the grandeur of his mansion. Instead, he now saw that the most profound wealth lay in the love and unity of his family. And as the seasons changed and the Ashford mansion continued to evolve into a sanctuary of joy and togetherness, Christian found solace in the simple fact that he had finally learned to be a true father, a man who cherished every smile, every laugh, and every tender gesture shared with those he loved. The transformation was not without its challenges, but with every obstacle, the bonds between them grew stronger, forged in the crucible of shared pain, hope, and redemption. Looking back on those harrowing days, Christian could scarcely believe how far he had come. What had once been a home filled with cold stone and empty corridors was now a living, breathing testament to the power of love and forgiveness. Laura's return had sparked not only Tobias's recovery but also a deep personal transformation in Christian himself. A transformation that promised a future where pride and isolation would be replaced by warmth, understanding, and the true joy of family. Thus, as the Ashford mansion bathed in the soft glow of twilight and the gentle murmur of familial laughter, Christian, Laura, Tobias, and Reed embraced the promise of each new day. They understood that while the past could never be erased, it could be redeemed through the enduring power of love and the courage to change. In their hearts, they carried the memory of every painful lesson and every moment of grace that had brought them together, knowing that their future was built not on wealth or power, but on the priceless bond of family. In the end, it was not the lure of wealth or the empty promises of material excess that sustained them, but rather the quiet, steadfast joy that filled their hearts and the hopeful promise of an even brighter future together. In the humble yet radiant world of the Marwood family, every small kindness, every gesture of warmth became the building block of a legacy that would transcend the cold, unyielding walls of their past. For years, the once imposing Hawthorne estate had stood as a monument to a life devoted to ambition and the relentless pursuit of riches. But when the seeds of genuine love and selfless compassion took root within its vast halls, it was as if a long winter had finally given way to the tender blooms of spring. The transformation was subtle at first, a gentle, almost imperceptible softening of the stern features that had once defined the grand foyer, the silent corridors that seemed to echo with memories of solitude and loss. Soon, however, the change became undeniable. The mansion, renamed Marwood Hall, no longer served merely as a repository of cold, hard wealth. Instead, it emerged as a sanctuary where laughter and heartfelt conversations mingled with the rustling of autumn leaves and the soft whispers of a new beginning. At the heart of this change was the story of how one simple, unselfish act had transformed not only the life of a fragile, wounded child, but had also rekindled the light within an entire family. Tobias, once a quiet, withdrawn boy whose tender soul had been overshadowed by the weight of an indifferent world, now shone with a radiance that only the purest love could kindle. His eyes, once dulled by pain and loneliness, sparkled with hope as he clung to the memory of Laura, an extraordinary woman whose gentle presence had healed him when no one else could. Laura had never sought riches or accolades. Instead, she had offered her heart freely, and in doing so, had woven a tapestry of love so intricate that it redefined the very notion of family. It was on a cold winter's evening, when the wind outside carried with it the scent of distant pine and the soft murmur of falling snow, that the true power of Laura's kindness was revealed. The transformation in Marwood Hall was palpable, a living, breathing miracle that defied all expectation. Gone were the days when the mansion's vast corridors echoed with the sterile sounds of emptiness. Now every room resonated with the gentle hum of laughter, the soft cadence of shared stories, and the tender murmur of voices unburdened by regret. It was as if each brick, each polished surface, had been imbued with the magic of genuine human connection, a magic that no amount of money or cold ambition could ever replicate. In a warmly lit parlor, where the flickering glow of a grand fireplace played upon the faces of those gathered, the family celebrated the simple pleasures that made life worth living. At the center of the gathering was Tobias, his once troubled face now illuminated by a quiet smile that spoke of recovery and renewed hope. His small hands, which had trembled in the shadow of despair, now clutched a brightly colored drawing he had made for Laura, a small token of his gratitude and a testament to the healing power of love. The drawing, a vibrant mosaic of hues and gentle shapes, was more than just a child's creation. It was an emblem of transformation, a reminder that true joy could be found in the smallest acts of kindness. Outside, the winter night had surrendered to the promise of a new dawn. As the first rays of the sun broke over the horizon, they touched the white-capped turrets of Marwood Hall and bathed its grounds in a soft golden light. The entire estate seemed to awaken from a long slumber, its once stoic facade now softened by the gentle caress of morning warmth. In the quiet moments of that new day, the family gathered around a long wooden table for breakfast, their voices blending into a harmonious chorus of gratitude and newfound purpose. It was here, in these unassuming rituals of everyday life, that the true meaning of family was rediscovered, a meaning that lay not in the grandeur of opulence, but in the sincerity of every shared moment and every heartfelt embrace. As the days unfolded, each new moment added another brushstroke to the evolving portrait of the Marwood family. The story of how Laura had come to be an indispensable presence in Tobias's life was told and retold, not as a tale of sacrifice or obligation, but as a celebration of the extraordinary power of compassion. Neighbors and friends began to notice the change, whispering among themselves about the transformation that had occurred within the once isolated estate. The grandeur of Marwood Hall was still evident in its architecture and its storied history, but its true beauty lay in the soft laughter of children playing in its halls, the gentle murmur of love that permeated every room, and the steadfast commitment of a family that had learned to treasure the intangible gifts of affection and togetherness. In one memorable instance, during a lively autumn festival held on the expansive grounds of Marwood Hall, Tobias and his newfound friend Reed led a spirited game of hide-and-seek among the ancient oak trees. The crisp air was filled with the joyful exclamations of children, and even Christian, who had once been the embodiment of detached authority, found himself smiling as he watched the carefree play. It was a scene that could have been lifted from a timeless fable, a reminder that even in a world built on cold stone and lofty ambitions, the human heart could find solace and delight in the simplest of pleasures. The festival became a symbol of the family's rebirth, a vivid tableau of unity and hope that defied the odds and celebrated the resilience of the human spirit. Later that same year, as winter once again drew near and the landscape was transformed into a glittering wonderland of frost and ice, the Marwood family gathered for a grand celebration of gratitude and renewal, around a massive, intricately decorated Christmas tree that stood proudly in the heart of the refurbished dining hall. Each member of the family shared their hopes and dreams for the future. Laura, radiant in a simple yet elegant dress, recounted the many small miracles that had brought them together, a narrative woven with threads of kindness, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that love could conquer even the deepest wounds. Tobias, his eyes shining with quiet determination, declared that his art would one day capture the beauty of their journey, ensuring that the lessons of compassion and forgiveness would never be forgotten. Christian, his voice soft yet filled with heartfelt conviction, spoke of the profound transformation he had undergone. He admitted that the pursuit of wealth and the relentless drive for success had once blinded him to the true treasures of life. "I now understand," he said, his eyes brimming with sincere emotion, "that our greatest riches are not measured in gold or silver, but in the love that fills our hearts and the shared moments that create memories beyond measure." His words resonated deeply with everyone present, for in that moment, the cold, calculating man who had once ruled Marwood Hall with an iron fist had been transformed into a tender, loving father who recognized that his greatest legacy was the family he had nurtured and the joy they now shared. As the night drew to a close, the family gathered in the softly lit drawing room, where the gentle strains of a piano melody played in the background. It was a scene that evoked both nostalgia and hope, a reminder that even the darkest moments could be illuminated by the light of forgiveness and the promise of new beginnings. The conversation flowed freely, punctuated by bursts of laughter and quiet expressions of gratitude. In that warm, intimate setting, every member of the Marwood family felt a profound sense of belonging, a sense that the bonds they had forged through adversity would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. In the quiet aftermath of the celebration, as the family retired for the night, Christian found himself alone in the vast, now transformed corridors of Marwood Hall. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and cold ambition, had become a living testament to the power of love and the beauty of redemption. He wandered slowly through the halls, pausing to touch the polished banisters and gaze at the portraits that now seemed to smile with gentle familiarity. With each step, he recalled the painful lessons of his past and the miraculous changes that had swept through his life. Reminders that true wealth was not accumulated through selfish pursuits, but was nurtured through acts of kindness and the willingness to open one's heart. As dawn broke on a new day, the Marwood family once again gathered around a table laden with simple, wholesome fare, a breakfast that celebrated both the sustenance of the body and the nourishment of the soul. In that quiet moment, with the soft light of morning filtering through the grand windows, they shared a renewed sense of purpose. It was a day filled not with extravagant plans or lofty promises, but with the genuine contentment of being together, of knowing that every shared smile and every loving touch was a victory over the hardships of the past. And if this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that sometimes the greatest changes in life begin with a simple act of kindness. You never know the impact your compassion can have on someone else's world. It might just be the light they've been waiting for. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where love and empathy changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe more people need to hear messages like this, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone special, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate the power of the human heart. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the power of love.